And now I'd like to introduce panel number 3 called Protect Your Legacy and Wealth. Now, this is where we get down about the importance of end-of-life care, but the financial aspect of that. So I'd like to introduce Jarvis Stewart. He's the chairman and chief strategist of Cover Communications. By the way, Cover Communications, very esteemed company. It's a strategic communications and government affairs firm with expertise in crisis management and corporate DEI strategy development. A little bit more about Jarvis. He's recognized nationally for his crisis communications and counsel work given to global industry leaders, elected officials, and celebrities on sensitive matters impacting their reputation and their brand. And boy, are you needed these days. Prior to his consulting career, he served as chief of staff to former U.S. Representative Harold Ford Jr. of Tennessee, on the senior staff of former Clinton Labor Secretary Alexis M. Herman. Jarvis also served on the Biden-Harris 2020 National Finance Committee and the Biden for President Maryland Leadership Council. He is also a founding partner of the Washington Nationals and was the first chairman of the Washington Nationals Baseball Academy. And folks, he has some heavy hitters who will be joining us today. One of them, a very good friend of mine. I'm not going to introduce her. I'll leave that pleasure to you, Jarvis. All right, everyone, please welcome Jarvis Stewart.
I am absolutely honored to be here this afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Jeff, for that very esteemed and thoughtful introduction. It's always good to be with my friends and family members that's part of Compassionate Choices, and we at Cover Communications cannot be more thankful for a long engagement with the organization and working hard from California to DC in supporting the mission, purpose, and vision of Kim, the CEO, and obviously Brandy and so many others. So we're excited. So with that being said, I want to take this opportunity to introduce two very good friends. Both of them happen to be on the panel today. And I'm going to start with my my longtime friend, Dr. Julianne Malveaux. Many of you know Dr. Malveaux is an esteemed author of more than 10 plus books over the years. She is a MIT trained economist. She is currently the Dean of Ethnic Studies at Cal State Los Angeles. She is. I can go on and on about her. There's so many other great things that she's done. She is the former president of Benedict College, which, as you know, Bennett College. I'm sorry, Bennett College. She always corrects me when I make that mistake. But she's the former president of Bennett College, on an amazing women's college in North Carolina. And so we are excited to have Dr. Malveaux, who's going to share some thoughts about why this issue around family and faith, and as we transition in the journey home, is so critical, particularly African-American communities. Secondly, we have Ricardo Thomas. Ricardo Thomas is, that's right. Among the many things he is a part of, Ricardo is a member of the African American Leadership Council here at Compassionate Choices. But for 35 years, he has been helping families around the country, particularly in his beloved state of Louisiana, and the city of New Orleans, where he has helped them transition and think about their family finances, to think about their legacy, to think about many of the things that Bishop Vashti McKenzie just spoke about. How do we prepare for the journey home? We don't want to wait until after the fact. And so we're gonna have Ricardo to share some of those ideas. One of the other things that I love about Ricardo, his firm is called Thomas-Waddell, where this is one of the many things that they focus on. but he's also a professor. He is have spoken at and taught at University of New Orleans. And so anyone who spends time like Dr. Malveaux, spend time with young people and helping them think through the next phase of their life. I am always, as a son of a teacher, I am always celebrate the most noble profession, and that is being an educator. So with that being said, please welcome my friends, Dr. Malveaux and Ricardo Thomas. So we're going to jump right in. And the way I want to think about this, Dr. Malveaux and Ricardo, is that I really want Dr. Malveaux to talk about it from a macro level. How do we think about it broadly when you think of the role of sort of the finances and legacies and all that sort of good stuff? And then Ricardo, I want you to dig a little deeper and get really specific about some of the things, particularly those in our community, need to really focus on. So let's start with this. So Dr. Malveaux, how should we think? We know that oftentimes our heads of household are women in the African-American community, but in those instances where we have African-American fathers and husbands who may transition earlier than we anticipated. We saw a lot of this during COVID, as you and I have talked about. How should particularly African-American women think about this, preparing for this issue?
Okay, Jarvis, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Kim. I appreciate you. We've not been together in a long time, so good to see you. And of course, Brandy, who does amazing work. It's really important for us to think about what's next.
Right.
And I think that all too often in the African-American community, we're reluctant to think about what's next. It's difficult to raise a question with parents. What do you do with your stuff?
Right.
Who's gonna get your stuff? Are we all gonna sit around fighting about your stuff? And forgive my ebonics, but this is a conversation that happens up in somebody's house. What's going on? And so, and it's challenging. I mean, my baby sister, actually, I will share, my mom died 2 years ago. She was 93. She gathered us all together about 1986. And she said, I'm leaving the house, Antoinette, because she's my favorite. Now, I was kind of a little bit feeling some kind of way about that, but that's her stuff. She can leave it to whoever. She said, you get the books, she gets the records, she gets the jewelry. And we all, and I guess whatever my brother got, we don't talk about him. I call him don't ask, don't tell. So ask me nothing about him, I go tell you. But in any case, she was very transparent. She was transparent because she was pushed to be so. Before that, when we talked to her, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. I mean, people act like, you know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And basically, if you go into heaven, you're going to have to die. So these are hard conversations in the Black community. People don't want to have them. But if you don't have them, you have 95 Black folks and random cousins fighting over a little bit of piece of land. You know that about Louisiana with air property. So I think part of the work we do is to ask people to be transparent and to help them be transparent by providing guidebooks, conversations in our churches, pushing. Vashti laid it out. I can call her Vashti if I want to, she my soror. But Reverend McKinney laid it out. She laid it out. This is what we have to do. So here's what we end up with if we don't. The poverty numbers came out last week, Tuesday. We find that Black women are among the poorest people. Part of our poverty is a function of our inability to deal with transfer of wealth, transfer of income. And so guess what? If you leave no will, guess who gets it? The people that you cannot stand. The government gets it. They'll get 2/3 of it. If you have not laid it out, they will get it. Do you really want the oppressor to get your money? Come on. No, you don't. And so the issue is how we begin to have conversations that are real about assets. Your legacy is what you have earned this money over the years. You have, you've saved, you've invested. Now, do you want Uncle Sam to get it? Or do you want your children to get it? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. not only that, it's, I mean, the financial piece is a huge piece, but the other issue is how you want to go out.
Yeah.
How
Well, I
you-
mean, and that's a good transition, because when you think about the conversation that we've had one-on-one, and Ricardo, this is where I'm going to pull you into the conversation. So when you think about assets, which is a very strong financial term, Julianne talked about land, we talked about investment, we talked about stock portfolio. I mean, this is probably the first time in history that we see more and more African Americans are in fact creating a little bit of wealth. Wealth is a relative term. We're not saying necessarily the Rockefellers. We're not necessarily saying Robert Smith or Oprah Winfrey, but we, for the first time in a long time, we've actually begun to create a little bit of a wealth. As we begin to transition and pass away and die, how do we protect those? What instruments out there do we, as Black people, need to be thinking about? We know about wills, we know about trust, but let's go a little deeper on that, Ricardo.
So with that, let me start by piggybacking on what you said about going to heaven.
Right.
Well, you know, we always say heaven is a prepared place for prepared people. Well,
Right.
guess what? So is earth. Okay. So is earth. We got to be prepared. We have to have a plan. We have to have a conversation. And because too many times over the years, if we look at it generationally, you know, I remember growing up as a kid and hearing the grandparents say, oh, I don't want them in my business. I don't want you to know my stuff. And inevitably, what ends up happening, all of those things that you mentioned earlier that we work very hard for is lost. And at the same time, we are reluctant many times to go to a professional, either because one, we don't want anybody to know our business. And my thing is this: who would you prefer to know your business? The professional who can help you lay out a plan to make sure your family members get it, or when they see it in the newspaper,
Hello.
okay, when everything goes to the auction or the succession or what have you, because you have not put your affairs in order. So one way or the other. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Let's look, the Prince is a key
That's right.
example
Yeah.
of basically Black wealth loss, leaving without a will, leaving without any directives. And so who gets it?
But let's take it a step further. So you mentioned Prince. We can go back to Aretha Franklin,
Yes.
who has a special needs son and did not have things in place. Better example, James Brown. How long was his body on ice?
Soul on ice. Soul on ice is another story, bro. We not gonna.
And it's unfortunate, but it brings
Yes.
up a good point, because oftentimes we assume just because they're making a lot of money or they have wealth or they present the picture of wealth, that they have all of their financial affairs in order. And what we're finding out over and over and over is that these people are just like the rest of us,
That's right.
unless they are sitting down and talking to competent professionals, not the guy down the street, not, oh, well, you know, mama said if you do it like that. No,
Mm-mm.
Right.
Mm-mm.
competent, qualified professionals who will tell you what you need to know and what not just what you want to hear. Can we properly
And
pass
so,
on?
Ricardo, you raise up a good point. So when you think about competent professionals,
Mhm.
right? I mean, what does that look like? Are we talking about lawyers? Are we talking about certified financial planners like yourself? Do we
Mhm.
start with those institutions that we often feel most comfortable with? Is that the church? Is that, you know, an older sibling or older child? Where do we begin to carefully tiptoe into that conversation by having qualified professionals or people that we can trust to begin to put pen to paper?
So with that, first I can say all of the above, because depending on your situation will determine which of those professionals or combinations of those professionals that you will actually need.
Right.
You know, for some folks, they may just need the attorney to sit down with them to put together the will and so forth. But the larger your portfolio gets, the larger your net worth is, the more you will need those other professionals, that CPA,
Right.
you know, that attorney, different types of attorneys, you know, and so forth, that financial planner, which I like to call the head coach of the team, who understands the language of all of those different professionals to put those pieces of the puzzle together
Yes.
to make sure that it works properly.
But
So
you know,
just-
Jarvis, one of the things that's important to note is I don't care whether you're 75 or 25. If you're working for an organization, you have insurance that comes to your organization.
Right.
So whether if you're 25, 35, 45, you need to be thinking, and plus COVID reminded us
It sure did.
that death
Absolutely.
has no a ticket, that you can knock off any day. Because this was some ugly mess that happened.
Right.
And we saw young people, very young people, dying.
Mhm.
And you have people squabbling over their little bit of life insurance, which might not be a little bit. If you work for the right person, you might have 6 figures life insurance.
Yeah.
And then mama, husband, baby daddy,
Mhm.
other than husband. Okay, I didn't go there. But in any case, people, you need to be clear.
Right.
People need to be clear. Life is not guaranteed. Death is guaranteed.
Right.
What's not guaranteed is when. And so
So,
while
so let me ask you this question. So you raise a really good point, and we because we are all family here, and we do have a tendency to sort of laugh and talk about, because we all have cousins and family members and long history. There's a cultural component to this. You know, we as Black people have not always had the best relationship with money, right? We as Black, because
There are
one,
reasons
we
for
haven't
that.
always had it.
there are reasons for that.
That's exactly right. We haven't always had it. It's whether we can talk all day long as an economist. You have schooled me, so to speak, on how do you think about this for generations to come. But culturally, there's an issue there that we've got to deal with. And we have a tendency, and Ricardo, you talked about this a little earlier, of being a little shy, a little shameful, a little bit of tepid in having that conversation. But Julianne, let's talk about, Dr. Bishop McKenzie talked a little bit about it earlier, about the cultural implications here and how oftentimes that is holding us back if we don't lean into it. How do we deal with the idea of money and succession planning in our lives from a cultural perspective?
Well, I think Sister Bishop really raised a lot of really important questions
She did.
about how our churches can take the lead. And still half of us, we're living in a heathen age. I joined, but we live in a heathen age, but still half of African-American people do go to church.
Right.
And churches can play a role and a leadership role in saying, let's talk about this. You know, oftentimes somebody comes in to do missionary Sunday or whatever Sunday. How about financial Sunday?
Right.
How about saying, let's just talk about this? I think it's really important for us to understand that the world is tilted right now against Black people. But we have more than we had 100 years ago. We have more agency, all kinds of things. And so what we need to be talking about is how we preserve that. What you do not want to do as a descendant of enslaved people is let Uncle Sam, the government, take 2/3 of your estate because you did not write a will. That's what I'm saying. You just giving your money back to the oppressor. You do not want to do that. And so I think our churches, our sororities and fraternities and others can begin to raise consciousness. But it's so very important, Jarvis, because really you see people who have stuff. You look at them, you say, God, they're wealthy. But if their wealth goes back to the government, all y'all just laugh for a minute, goes back to the government.
Right.
What are you really saying?
Yeah.
You did not prepare your children and your grandchildren to basically enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Ricardo, jump in on this, because I know this is one of the things that you advise your clients and others in this space.
Absolutely. So she mentioned already the importance of having a
Dr.
will.
J.
Doc-
Don't be calling me in the third person in
I'm
my
sorry.
face.
But it was already mentioned, Dr. Malveaux, the importance of having the will, but we really need to take it a step further. Not just having the will, but making sure the will is up to date.
Yes.
And making sure the other documents around it are up to date as well.
Yes.
A perfect example, in this day and age, when we live with 1, 2, 3 marriages, and you haven't updated the beneficiaries, and you assume, oh, well, I've done a new will, so I'm covered, but you never went back to change those beneficiaries on your life insurance or your 401k on the job, guess who's going to get it? Not the current spouse
Now, the dude you left.
or dudette.
Nah, it would be the dude. But in any case.
Yeah.
you
That's
make
a
really
good point. That's a very
And
good
the
point.
other
Yeah.
point, Jarvis, that's really important is to make sure that people know where your stuff is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sure you've
Yeah.
got a will, who has it, who's the executor.
right.
You've got all these important pieces of paper
Yeah.
that Brother Man has talked about, your insurance, Where is it? Don't have people scrambling through your house. Tell somebody
Right.
it's in the bank vault.
Yeah.
It's in my top drawer, wherever. Tell somebody.
Right.
Because I think that for a lot of people, I mean, I can tell you stories I won't, of folks who basically they left the will, but nobody could find it.
Everybody can find it.
Then after the fact, somebody found it. Meanwhile, the old one had been adjudicated.
Right.
So
Well, so in the final minutes that we have left here, here's and one of the things, and Julianne and Ricardo, you both know this very well, that at the core of the journey home and the conversations that we have and need to have in our community, it's about peace. And we often culturally, as we talked about earlier, we often talk about this idea of we want our loved ones to die peacefully. We want our loved ones to live, to pass away in a space that they will be peaceful, but so will the family. Part of what we do at Compassion and Choices is to provide peace of mind for not only those that are transitioning, but obviously the family. How important is planning, supporting our peaceful transition? And I'll start with you, Ricardo, and then we go.
I'll share with you exactly what I share with my clients. I say, if you want to have family financial peace, put it in writing. That way, all they can do is go to the cemetery and stomp on the ground, but ain't nobody listening.
That's right.
Because you've put it in writing.
Right.
That's the key. By having that roadmap there, everybody knows what they're entitled to or what they're not entitled to. And there's no bickering amongst the living, because at the beginning of the day, you decided what you wanted to do with your stuff. And they can be upset all they want, but if that roadmap is there, it is what it is. Deal with it and move on.
That's good.
Yeah.
Julianne?
I think one of the most important things about Compassion and Choices is the extent to which we're looking at not just a financial, but looking at the whole continuum of end of life and how you, as an agent of your own life, choose to direct what end of life looks like. It has to do with how you want to die, euthanasia, cremation. I mean, we had a little challenge in my family about cremation, but my mama said, I want to be cremated. I want to be up in the earth. You know, she's a free spirit now, up in that, and that's what she wanted. So you dictate the course of your life, but you also dictate what happens to your stuff. And we Black folks who have been so frequently denied of stuff, which is why so many of us overconsume, because we didn't have that opportunity. So now who do you want to get your stuff? And that's your choice. And so that's why I think Compassion Choices is important. I underline the word choice. What do you want to happen when you're gone? What's next? And how do you want to play this one out? And economically, we can talk a lot about it. We also talk about it spiritually and emotionally. And we talk about all of that. We have to talk about is the fact that as our nation is aging, there's so many more of us, baby boomers. I mean, my friends are dying. I mean, I'll be 70 on Friday. I'll believe that. How can a bad girl turn 70? I mean, girls just want to have fun. But the fact is that you have more days behind you than you have ahead of you.
That's right.
And you have to really think about that. Not just me, but all of us. Think about what God gave us and the choices that we have.
Well, let me just say this in closing. I thank you both for your thought and your very colloquial responses to the questions. But the reality is this is serious. This is very serious work that we do. This is very serious attention that we need to give to this matter, because we want to get it right. And here's an opportunity to get it right. We've never been more educated in the history of mankind as people of color, as African Americans, as Black Americans. We've never had as much wealth as we have now. And so this is our opportunity to pause, to seek professional advice and counsel, to have the tough conversations, to think about it culturally, as Dr. Malveaux spoke about earlier. We understand that it's not always going to be easy. There are some challenges. It leaves a lump in your throat and potentially a tear in your eye. But the reality is, if we want to get it right the first time, as Bishop McKenzie spoke earlier, there's no do-overs.
Come on.
And here's the opportunity to get it right. There's no excuse for us to do it. So because of organizations like Compassion and Choices, who has a very robust and very aggressive, innovative African-American Leadership Council, the resources are there. We encourage those that are listening virtually, call us, engage us online, seek advice and counsel, and we're here to help. So with that being said, Ricardo, thank you for your leadership on the council and thoughts today. Dr. Malveaux, we thank you as well. And what?
Q&A.
Questions, that's right. I'm sorry, I was just going on. So we have.
What you doing,
This is when you
Jarvis?
throw stuff at me and say, hey, so we have questions, right? And so we've had some questions to come in online. So here we go. Where do we go? Where do we go when we earn less than $50,000 a year? Ricardo, let's start with you with that.
Well, excuse me.
For what kind of
Yeah.
professional support do we get?
Okay,
Right.
well, a couple of places. I think Dr. Malveaux mentioned that's where churches can step up and do workshops in the community to educate folks. That's a good starting point. But then from there, literally, going to a notary public, going to an attorney to just find out the basics. Well, this is my circumstance.
Right.
What tools do I need given, my particular situation? But those would be two good starting points.
But beyond that, Jarvis, there's so many civic organizations. I think that the National Council of Negro Women, as an example, does some work around older women and others. So if you earn less than $50,000 a year, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan. You have a lot of stuff that you still have, including if you work someplace, you probably have a pension or something. And the question is, who do you have on as your beneficiary?
Right.
Things like that. So the fact that you are a lower income earner does not mean that you should not be a planner.
That's a good point. And it's funny, someone just mentioned that her sister passed away and did not update the beneficiaries. And as a result, someone that she did not want, their family did not want to get, what was left.
Some random somebody.
Walked away with that's exactly right. We have some questions here in the audience. Dr. Williams?
In Louisiana, we have lots of different kinds of people. We have lots of Catholics. We have lots of Catholics. We have other people. Is it important to tell mothers, because it's usually Black mothers early, what to do? I know in my case, my mom got those little nickel insurance things for all of her 9 children. But of course, that will never be enough to bury us.
Right.
So what should they do then when they find out this is not going to take care of a funeral for my child? Where should they go next, even though they have those little $250 policies or what have you?
Well, I think that really just builds the case for what we've been talking about of starting the conversation early. The time to find out that you have one of those old debit policies where they paid on a Saturday morning is not at death time. So finding out and talking to mama 10, 15, 20 years before that, when you become an adult, have that adult conversation with mom and hopefully she will share as much with you as possible. But then by knowing, then it allows you the opportunity to help remedy the situation by getting your own policy. But waiting until death time it's really too late at that point. That's when we go into, well, I'm going to show my age here, the fish fries and the car washes, but the new generation now is the GoFundMe pages. And that's not a solid
That's
plan.
pitiful. You do
Exactly.
not want to have
Exactly.
yourself.
And it takes a
very
long
comfortable
time. It delays it.
Unless
Yeah.
you just totally, truly, ignorantly pitiful.
Yeah.
I think we have some other questions here in what we're really jumping all over virtually, but let's start, take a 2 or 3 from here.
One quick question. When you have all of your paperwork in place, there's all the documents. How do you deal with, and how do you have a conversation with the greedy person in the house that wants to challenge everything?
Well, I think you find yourself a nice, good lawyer. But other than that, but the greedy person should have been told there should be several copies of the will. Everybody should have one. Greedy. Okay, I'm editing myself because you know I'm thinking of myself.
You're thinking.
Oh, it's coming.
One should know this ain't happening. And just make sure that everybody knows. Everybody's family has a fool.
Yeah.
Everybody has to play a fool sometime. Make sure that, you know, in my family, my mom, we had a conversation. She said, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
All y'all know what's happening. And we had paperwork. And upon her death, we will release more paperwork. Now, if somebody wants to play the fool, they had to go get the lawyer
Exactly.
Right.
and pay for the lawyer.
Yeah.
And I think just it's really about transparency. And I think that a lot of times it's not just the money, it's the emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's not just about who got what, it's about how people felt about what went down. And so I think that leading up on transition and doing transition is also a time to do major family healing. Because there's stuff, people got stuff.
Yeah.
And we need to, but in terms of that's why, again, Kim, what the compassion choices, it's the choices that we make about end of life. And some of those choices about how we react to it.
We have another, yes, ma'am. And Kim, you're next.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight. I wanted to get a little bit of advice from you. In my practice, I work with mostly older adults, and a good amount of them were raised during the Depression, and they don't believe in banks. I've had patients that keep money sewn in linings of jackets, in mattresses. They may have it under a mattress. They may have it under a box. I live here in DC, but I've taken care of people everywhere.
I'm listening because I'm thinking they need to let people know where that stuff is, because that's an opportunity for theft.
Yeah.
Somebody coming up in your house and seeing, I have a colleague whose mother's diamond bracelet went missing because it was in a pocket of a blazer. And the young lady said she promised me the blazer. Well, she didn't promise you the diamond necklace, but you took it, or bracelet, whatever, she took it. But
Just trying to talk to them about even, their social security check now, because it has to be direct deposit.
Yeah.
They'll direct deposit it, but the third of the month, they'll go and take all of the money out of the bank because they don't want it in a bank.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to talk to them about what's the best thing for them to do. So if you could give me some pointers,
It
that
is a
would be helpful.
It is, yeah.
It
Thank you.
definitely is a challenge. I've dealt with folks, in similar situations, but I think part of it is letting them know the consequences of what's going to happen if they leave here and no one knows of the money in the coffee can buried in the backyard. I'm having a flashback from my uncle here who did that, and so forth. So letting them know that, that money they have there or, buried will be lost for no one to benefit from.
Yeah.
If no one has any information like that. So hopefully that will encourage them to do better when they know better. Yeah.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you both. What a wonderful conversation. I just wanted to mention for the question of a person who has $50,000 or less, what you can do to make sure people were aware that Compassionate Choices has partnered with Free Will. And on our website, there is a link to where you can fill out a free will online. So that is a resource for somebody who it could be a
That is great
resource
to
for
know.
anyone, but in particular, if you don't have the money to hire an attorney or a financial planner.
That's excellent. Excellent to know. Yes. Say that one more time, so that.
In your church or at your bank.
Right. A notary public in your church or in your bank that asked that question.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Any other questions? No, Brandy.
So this is one from the chat. My father's 70, no life insurance and pre-existing health conditions. Which would be a better option to ensure he is covered when he passes? He's on a fixed income, probably won't be able to afford regular life insurance rates at his age. Any advice?
Yeah, in a limited case like that, a burial plan, going to the cemetery and picking out the plot. That's regardless of your age or health, getting those things done, those final expense types of things. I'm usually not a proponent of it, but when you're looking at your age, you're looking at the person's health, then that limits, the amount of options you have with it. Now, there are some companies out there that will allow you to get coverage regardless of your age or your health, but just keep in mind, it's still going to be more expensive. The benefit is going to be limited, and just in some cases, there is not a perfect answer for every situation. Sometimes we're too far down the line, but that's something that they can do is, reaching out to the cemetery and trying to put some things in place.
Anything to add?
Also make sure that his social security, there are benefits there. They're not going to cover everything. But a lot of people ignore social security when they should pay attention to that. Medicare also, people ignore their opportunities there. Folks, this is a time at that age that folks should be looking at every asset that will flow their way. It may be supplemental social security. There's a disability involved, but basically the sister who's raising the question should also just be asking her dad or not. It doesn't sound like he's interested. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
What has he enrolled for that he's entitled to?
Yeah. We have time for one more question. One more question. Brandy, you have one online or? Yeah.
We have one online.
Oh, great. Perfect.
One from the chat is, what is the best way to find competent wills and estate attorneys they have New York, for example, but where do you go find these professionals?
I always recommend you can go to the law schools. That's one way to do it. And ask questions. I mean, first thing I tell folks all the time is remember, you're in the driver's seat. We are your employees. Okay. So don't be afraid to ask the questions that, a lot of times in our community, we assume just because a person is an attorney that they can do it all. When we talk about estate planning, that's a specialty area. It requires some special knowledge in there. So ask them how much of your practice is devoted to estate planning. We don't want just the template off of the internet if you have a complex situation. How long have you been doing this? How many, when's the last time you worked on an estate case? All of those things can help you to just decide whether or not that person is experienced enough for your situation or whether or not you should move on and look to someone else. But certainly going to the local law schools, getting referrals, from other attorneys or other family members or friends that may have gone through a similar situation, because it works on both sides of the coin. They could tell you, yes, this was a good attorney or a good experience, or no, run away from them. So those are a couple of things that you could do as well.
But I would also not avoid, and I would in fact embrace our civil society organizations, our National Council of Negro Women, our fraternities and sororities, all of whom do outreach for seniors. I think our National Urban League and others. You may not settle with the attorney that they propose, but at least get you started. So I would just say, look at, and your churches. Our churches are phenomenal resources for this kind of thing. And we really cannot ignore the way that they have been basically foundational in the African-American community. Again, you may not choose the attorney that they suggest, but it will get you started. So if you're looking for an attorney and you're looking for that kind of work, reach out to the churches. I belong to Metropolitan AME Church here in Washington, D.C., and we do a number of things with seniors. So I would just suggest that people ask their churches to be helpful.
Thank you.
One last question. We done. Thank you very much, Ricardo, Dr. Malveaux. Good to see you both. Hopefully we shine some light on the subject today. Thank you again.